It is such an honor to be here tonight. I have the opportunity to introduce our next speaker. He's a deacon, a Sunday school teacher, a lay preacher, and a six-term member of the House of Representatives from the great state of Texas. A former Chief Justice of the Court of Appeals, he serves as Vice Chair of the Judiciary Subcommittee on Crime, Terrorism, and Homeland Security. He's a Tea Party favorite, a leader in the fight to defund Planned Parenthood in Congress, and a true champion for values voters. Join me in welcoming Representative Louie Gohmert.
Gosh, thank you. Wow, it's such a treat. And I love Tony Perkins and all the folks at the FRC, and I'm thrilled that I get to be with you tonight. Thank you for being here. It's been real easy to duck out right after Colonel North spoke, but thanks for hanging with us. A lot going on now, right? You know? Yeah, I heard that even in here you've gotten news of what's going on today. But I do want to follow up on what Colonel North was talking about and touch on the Iran treaty. It's a treaty. It amends the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and that takes a treaty. And I don't care what kind of legislation you have, the U.S. Constitution cannot be amended by a piece of legislation, no matter how well drafted it is, and no matter if your name is a Republican name like Corker. You can't amend the Constitution. A treaty takes 2/3 of the Senate to ratify it. So if we're going to betray Israel, as this president apparently is going to, by golly, we at least ought to follow the Constitution. And I hope you will keep demanding that the Senate follow the Reid rule. The Reid rule is that when something you think is important is coming up, then you take 51 votes of your own members and set aside the 60-vote cloture rule requirement, and then you vote on what you know is that important. They should do that and they'll fail to ratify the treaty, and then we can enforce that it is an unenforceable treaty in any U.S. court, in any world court, because it was never ratified under our Constitution. That is too important. And you may have seen the news this week. Iran, all full of excitement with all the $150 billion that will be coming very shortly, and the hundreds of billions of dollars that will be flowing after this, they went ahead and announced, we are going to fund Hezbollah and Hamas more than we ever have. They're going to up their ante for terrorism. And folks, that is, well, the problem, and I've had people say, well, that alone ought to be grounds for impeachment. And you know what? If the betrayal of Israel by not taking up the Iran treaty as a treaty had gone through without the Corker bill, I would have already filed articles of impeachment. But that bill gives the president cover. I'm telling you, because the Constitution gives the Senate the authority to ratify treaties. And if the Senate comes along and says, okay, we're going to vote 98-1 to ratify this, if 2/3 don't disapprove it, it's going to be hard. It would be hard to impeach a president for following along with what the Senate and the House told him he could do under the Corker bill. So it is a real problem for us here in America when Congress is giving cover to what would otherwise be an article of impeachment. So that's a problem. Israel is being betrayed. And let me just bring something else up. I saw this coming in early 2011. We had a continuing resolution that was going to expire on a Friday night at midnight. And we started hearing the military was concerned, what are they going to do if there's a shutdown, because some of our military members are living so close to the vest that they're not going to be able to make their car payment, their home payment, and they've got to have those checks coming, some in Afghanistan, some in Iraq, and they needed to not have to worry about the check taking care of their families at home. So I went to the speaker and I told him about the problem. And I said, let's get this in a bill now to make sure that our military pay is treated exactly like Social Security. Now, I know the president was trying to scare people in a prior shutdown where he shut down the government. But y'all did get that. That was not the okay. And he said, yeah, we're going to take care of it. Well, I saw pretty quick they weren't. So I filed a bill. And you need 218 to pass a bill in the House. And we were getting right at 218, and it was clear the speaker was not going to bring my bill to the floor. So I filed a discharge petition, and if you get 218 to sign on a discharge petition for a bill, it forces that bill to the floor, even though the speaker doesn't want it to come to the floor. And so we were trying to get more and more people to sign on the discharge petition, and I thought, there are Democrats that will want to support our military being paid on time. So I spoke to a leader it wasn't Pelosi, but I spoke to the next leader in line. And I said, look, I know you care about the military. I know we got a lot of Democrats that care about the military. I've got this discharge petition that will make sure they're paid anytime there's a shutdown. And can't you help me get some Democrats to sign on the discharge petition? He said, Louie, you need to understand, sometimes your leaders need an issue like getting the military paid out there so that he can get you to vote for a bill you don't want to vote for. Wow, that was an education. You got that? You figured that out? You leave our military hanging out there in harm's way, wondering if they're going to get a check, so you can come in and say, hey, you conservatives that want to stand on the Constitution and your oath, if you do that, our military will not get paid. So you better set the Constitution and your oath aside and do this for our military. I'm telling you, that's what it came down to. 10:30 that Friday night, and the speaker lined up people to stand up at conference and one after another say, if you vote against this CR, our military's not going to get paid, and you're going to have to account to our military. And I got up. Steve King told me later, I don't think anybody will ever be able to go in that room and not hear the words you were yelling bouncing off the walls. I was so enraged that our military was used for pawns to get us to vote for a bad CR. Now, you may hear the term clean CR. That's an oxymoron. There's no such thing. If it's a clean CR, it's as dirty as you could ever imagine, and we're funding all kinds of things. So, you probably heard different phrases to illustrate, the good and the bad. Gee, I've got a great mother-in-law, but, the old thing, your car went off the cliff, that's the bad news. The good news, your mother-in-law was in it. Well, I love my mother-in-law, and she loves me, but so that wouldn't be mixed emotions. But this morning at conference, it was done in this order. We're going to take up a continuing resolution and pass it next week that funds Planned Parenthood. And by the way, I'm resigning. So that was the speaker's way of letting us know what was coming. And listen, look, I appreciate the support I've gotten. I've met a number of you before, seen you in the halls, and I appreciate the encouragement about speaker. But look, let me take you back to January. Some of us, after we did this omnibus where everything got funded but Homeland Security, And then we were going to hold back funding for Homeland Security and hold it hostage. So if the president didn't fund, or if he was trying to fund his amnesty, well, we wouldn't fund Homeland Security. Well, as soon as that happened, I may look stupid, but I'm not that stupid. I knew what was going to happen. We were going to get down to the wire, and we were going to be told, hey, guys, we can't fail to fund the Border Patrol and TSA and all these critical things. And I know there were some people that were saying, well, but those are essential public employees. Well, you know who decides that? The president. He decides who's essential. You think he wouldn't leave the border open if we didn't fund Homeland Security? It reminded me of that Danny DeVito movie where Bette Midler's his wife and he couldn't stand her and she was taken hostages, and the guys called and said, you know, you give us so many $1 million or we'll kill your wife. He says, oh, great, wow. And that's what it reminded me of. You know, we got Homeland Security hostage. We're not going to fund it if you don't give up the amnesty. Really? You would do that? That's awesome. So anyway, not a good idea. The old saying is you never take a hostage that the other side wants you to shoot. You know, that's how it goes. So we knew what was coming. So that's what motivated a number of us to try once again to see if we could get a new speaker. We tried for a few weeks, and Thomas Massey and Jim Bridenstine called me on Friday night. We were going to have a joint conference call Saturday morning and said, Louie, we've been stuck at 9. We need 29. We can't get past 9. They're all using the same excuse to their constituents back that they did 2 years ago when we tried this. They want the money that the speaker can raise for them. They want the committee that he can get for them, want the chairmanship. But they've got so many constituents that were saying, don't vote for John Boehner. They would say, look, I would vote for anybody else if somebody announced. And Thomas and Jim said, you need to announce. You're the one that could get the talk show hosts going. And I said, guys, I thought about it. But if I announce, then it's not just the Republican establishment that comes after me, calling me nuts and everything else. And I'm quite confident in my intellect. Thank you very much. And if one of you are the one that call me a moron, there's no E in moron, okay? But anyway, I said, but the trouble is the Democrat establishment would get on board and we would lose the issue of failed leadership, and it would be about this crazy guy from Texas. And they said, no, but we need you to do that or we'll not get past 9. And I said, all right, we got a conference call with all 9 in the morning. We'll talk about it then. I knew that'd give me a chance to think about it, pray about it. So the next morning, they went through what they had to say. I said what I did, and the others agreed, we think you need to announce. And I said, I've thought about it. The only way I can announce is if somebody announces before me so that I can say it's not about me. You know, it's about getting a new speaker. And I knew when I announced, and Ted Yoho said, well, Louie, if that's all it'll take, I'll announce this afternoon. That was Saturday afternoon. He had sent out a press release announcing. I called Fox. They said, sure, come on, Fox and Friends in the morning. I did. They replayed it during the day. The talk shows talked about it. And there were tens of thousands. I don't know. I had so many people tell me that they got over 1,000 calls from constituents saying, vote for Louie. And one of them, I said, really, what are you going to do? And this was a person from up north, said, well, the speaker's giving me a chairmanship. I've got to vote for him. But I just thought it would make you feel good to know I have that many constituents that support you. Well, wow. So I knew going in, I was going to make a lot of people angry, but the goal was to get to 29. In fact, I heard about a guy that had bred eventually getting to the meanest, biggest dog anybody had ever seen, just a real terror. And he had it running around in his front yard. One day he gets a knock on the door, and there's a little elderly lady there, and she said, I'm so sorry to tell you that my dog killed your dog. And he said, I don't think so. And she said, yes, I'm so sorry. He's looking around, well, didn't see the dog. He said, well, what kind of dog you got? She said, she's a little Pekingese. There's no way your little Pekingese killed my big dog. And she said, yes, I'm sorry that happened. He said, well, how would your dog have killed my dog? He said, she got stuck in his throat. And say, so I was going to be the little Pekingese that got stuck in the big dog's throat. I was willing to sacrifice. If everybody was there and voting, then we needed 29 to vote for somebody besides the current speaker. And that would throw it to a second ballot for the first time since 1920s. And then we would call an emergency conference, and we'd go to conference, and I knew it wouldn't be me, but we would have a compromised speaker, and it would be somebody that I knew we could trust. So that's why that happened. So there's no sense in me running for speaker now that I've still got so many people angry with me, because every time, and I know people mean well, but every time they tell their congressman, you should have voted for Louie, they get mad at me all over again. So anyway, all right, thanks. So anyway, I'm supporting Dan Webster. He's a fellow believer. He was the first Republican Speaker of the House in Florida. He's a good man. His record's not quite as conservative as mine, but he's a good man. He will allow the majority to work its will, and that's all we're asking. That's all we're asking. Now, if you have somebody tell you, like I've had tell me many times, we've had this right-wing radical little bitty group that has hijacked our Republican Congress, you need to set them straight. And there was a vote that established that. And that was the vote to fund Homeland Security that did not keep our promise and defund amnesty. Because members of Congress heard from their constituents back home. One after another went to the speaker and said, I'm with you, I love you, I want to help you, but my constituents are really angry. I can't vote for this. So he twisted some arms. He got 75 Republicans to vote with all the Democrats in order to fund Homeland Security without defunding the amnesty. There were 167 Republicans that voted against it. Now, maybe there may be some that are not all that conservative. But what it ought to tell you is that over 2/3, probably close to 3/4 of the Republicans in the House represent very conservative districts. So if somebody tells you that a small group of right-wing radicals has hijacked the Congress, you go, well, I've got numbers that say otherwise. It's a very small group that hijacked the massive conservative body within the Republican House of Representatives, and we're about to get that straight now. Okay? Now, I know mostly we're believers here, and the Pope, I was so thrilled that he came and spoke to Congress. Thought it was great. I'm a Christian, happen to be of the Baptist persuasion, and as Alan mentioned, I've been a deacon. I haven't been on the active list in some time, but when people say, well, you ready for all the meanness and backstabbing in Congress? I go, are you kidding? I'm a Baptist deacon here. Yeah, it was a walk in the park compared to some of those deacons meetings. And some of you know I'm not kidding about that. But anyway, so he brought up the issue of immigration, and there are an awful lot of wonderful people that say, look, we're supposed to be kind to the foreigners. We're supposed to be kind to the immigrant. Your forefathers, you may have been like that. But if Romans 13, 1 through 4 means anything, it means that the government exists to encourage proper conduct, and it is there to punish illegal conduct. That's right. So in a country that does not govern itself, that's one thing. If you've got a dictator and he's got an army, they got to enforce the law. But if you're in a country, specifically the United States of America, you, the people, are the government. You hire a servant ever so often, usually in November, sometimes May or other times, but it's called Election Day. And you hire servants to be in that government for you. You show up, you're supposed to, for jury duty. You show up, you are the government. And when you're acting in a government capacity, whether it's me, when I was a judge or someone, you are to enforce the law, because if you don't, the country falls. It goes to chaos. Then you get a dictatorship just like the founders were afraid of. So we got to do our job. Love one another. Follow the Beatitudes, but when you're in a government role, you enforce the law, because otherwise, this shining light, this shining city on a hill, it slides down that hill and it can't take care of the environment. It can't take care of people. It can't continue to bring in more people, give more visas than anywhere else on earth, even though we're such a small part of the world. It is the United States of America that's doing that. It's the United States of America that's keeping churches, that's keeping needy projects going around the world. So let's don't snuff out this project quite yet, this little experiment in a democratic republic. So I also want to encourage you, keep praying. That is critical. But I also want to convey what a preacher from Denton, Texas once said. Yeah, God's in control. But just because he's in control doesn't mean he wants you to lean on your shovel and pray for a hole. Let's get to the work while we pray. Thank you very much.
There's a place not too far away